Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I want to go through and take a look at the meta impact from the First Strike bundle and the associated changes that came into the game alongside that bundle. As always, chapters will be listed down below for those of you that want to skip ahead to any specific topic. And the first thing that I want to talk about today is why I'm making this video. So, with the release of the First Strike bundle last week, there has been a lot of attention going to the legendary Akira and the legendary Valdore, and most of that attention has been directed at the ships themselves. However, Cryptic did go through and make another massive set of changes alongside the release of that bundle that are going to have a significant impact on the meta and may directly impact how you build your ships moving forward. And these changes specifically are that they have went through and removed the restrictions on all of the consoles off of the Akira line of ships and the Valdore line of ships, meaning that you can now use those consoles on whatever ship you want to use them on. There is no faction restriction. There is no class restriction. You can just directly use whatever console from the Akira and whatever console you want from the Valdore on whatever ship you want. And I know that's going to bring up a question from some of you of, does this mean you have to buy the bundle to benefit from this? And the answer is no. There are some things exclusive to the bundle that you will have to buy the bundle if you want to get, like the Maelstrom Torpedo or the new pets that were released on the two new ships. But for the console changes, if you have existing versions of those ships, or you want to just go out and just pick up that specific ship for that console, then you can go through and do that. However, if you're looking to pick up a ton of these ships to go out and get these consoles, then it may just be more economical for you to just wait for a good sale on the First Strike bundle, take advantage of a Zen charge bonus, which I think is still running as of me recording this, and just go in and pick the bundle up during a good sale. That may be a more economical route rather than you buying the T5 and T6 version of these ships. So if you already have them, or if you're only interested in some of the lower tier ships, like the tier 3 Valdore or the T3 Akira, which you can get from the shipyard for like 75k dill, then that's obviously a lot cheaper than buying the entire bundle if that's the only stuff you care about. And now let's take a look at the Valdore consoles. Up on screen now is the tooltips for all of the consoles from the Valdore line of ships and the set bonus there at the bottom left. So at the left, we have the Shield Absorptive Frequency Generator, which is from the Tier 3 version of the Valdore. The middle is the Ionized Particle Beam from the Tier 5 Mogai. And then at the right, we have the Ablative Hazard Shielding console off of the Tier 6 Morrigu. So let's start off looking at the Shield Absorptive Frequency Generator. This is probably the console that's going to be getting the most attention because it being made, or it being unrestricted so it can be used on any ship, is the biggest change that we had last week in my opinion. So the reason I'm saying that is because the Shield Absorptive Frequency Generator, also known as the Valdore console, is probably the best shield heal that exists in Star Trek Online. It does require that you use energy weapons to proc it, but if you're using a tank build or even just a standard like cannon build or beam build, you'll be able to proc it enough to get quite a bit of survivability from it. The Valdore console has no activation on it. There's no clicky. There's nothing for you to hit. Basically, it will automatically activate anytime your shields or a shield facing you have goes below 90% health. It will activate and add a proc to your weapons. That'll be a per shot proc, so better than most of the procs you're used to. 2.5% chance per shot for all energy weapons to restore shields for 200% of the outgoing damage of the shot that procs this console. So if you have a weapon go off that procs it, that does 200k damage to your foe, this is going to give you 400k of shield healing. So you can see how this can be quite potent when you're doing a fair bit of damage, when you have a lot of outgoing shots with energy weapons, and when you're taking a bit of threat. It's giving you quite a bit of shield healing. And if you look at the parse I have here at the bottom right, in a solo HSC that I did on stream the other day, I got almost 10,000 healing per second from this console. So over the course of, I think it was like 6 or 7 minutes, I got 3.3 million shield healing from this console. And I have seen people already with parses where they were getting upwards of 20k healing per second from this console. So it's insanely powerful. And the nice thing about this is you don't have to get the bundle, to get this console. And in the game, like if you want to get it, it's cheap. This is a T3 ship, so it is in the shipyard now if you have cross-faction flying unlocked. And it used to be available in the C store for 1,000 Zen, but a couple years back they moved all of the low-tier ships over to the Dill store. So the cost of the dilithium cost to get it now is going to be like 75k dilithium. And if you're in a fleet that has a completed dill mine, that'll be discounted a little bit more. So you see here, it would cost like just under 64k dill is what that Raptor there would cost. And that would be the same cost for this T3 Valdore and also the T3 Akira. So you can get what is probably the best shield heal in the game for like 64,000 lithium. So that's a really accessible option there. And I think for a lot of people, this is really going to be a game changer. This is going to massively boost survivability for tank builds, or even for just general play builds that have energy weapons on that just want a little bit more survivability. This console is going to be a massive boost for a lot of people. And if you are running an energy weapon build, if you're doing pugs and you just want to try to increase your survivability a little bit, I would recommend you pick up this console, whether it be from the Dill or for dilithium from the shipyard there, or you pick up the entire bundle. I would recommend you try it out because it is legitimately a very, very good console. And the next console is the Ionized Particle Beam. This is from the Tier 5 Mogai Heavy Warbird Retrofit, which is going to run you 2,500 Zen in the C-Store. And of course, again, if you buy the First Strike bundle, the Legendary Valdore would include this console. So again, if you're really wanting this, it may just be more economical to go out and pick up the bundle if you don't already have all of these ships laying around. This console really isn't that notable. Basically, it has no passives, other than the fact that it adds a proc to your weapons, a 3% proc, and that proc will expose your target, and if you hit them with that clicky during that duration, the clicky will do more damage during the time that the target is exposed. This is buffed by EPG and Aux Power, so maybe for those of you that are wanting to mess around with electrical damage or just looking for another toy to mess around with on your side builds, this might be something to consider. Now, looking at this in game here, I have a tooltip of what it looks like when it is supercharged, and I'll compare that to what it looks like normally. You see the DPS number there goes from 40.3 up to 62 when it's supercharged. So if you do have your weapons proc on the target to expose them and you time it to hit during that 12-second window, you'll get a bit more out of this console. And again, you can spam this once a minute with its base cooldown. And if you use Uncon, you should be able to get it up quite a bit more. Let's see what it looks like when it fires.
Warning. Ship
So it's a big electrical charge there. And just a note, this is on a character that like has absolutely nothing on it. So whatever I test here is not going to look good performance-wise. So that's why the numbers are insanely low. And this does say that it scales with aux. So let's take a picture of what it looks like at 0 aux, first what it looks like at max. There's the before picture. And let's turn up the aux power here. Yeah, that is scaling up quite well with aux power. So yeah, if you're on like a really psi heavy build, this might be something that you might want to at least mess around with. But I wouldn't go out and pick up this ship, if explicitly for this console. I don't think it's going to be that good. But again, if you get the legendary one, then this would be a console that you would get as part of that bundle. Next up, we have the Ablative Hazard Shielding console. This is a console that is available on a couple different ships. It's available on the T6 Morgu, which is the tier 6 version of the Valdore or Mogai. Then we have a version of it on the Arbiter, and then also the Garak. These are tier 6 Zen ships, so they cost 3,000 Zen per. So if you did want to run this console in the set, it would be very important, if you're not getting it via the legendary bundle, if you're going out and just picking this up in the C store on its own, you would need to make sure that you're getting the Morgu, because the console or the versions of this console on the Arbiter and Karak are parts of different sets. So if you went out and picked up the Arbiter, you wouldn't be able to use this as part of the set with the other Mogai consoles or the other Valdore consoles. So just keep that in mind. And this console has passives on it for some shield resistance, and it improves your shield regen by a little bit. And then it's got a clicky on it that gives you a little bit of survivability. This console really isn't that good. It's basically like a budget tier survivability console, I would say. And the only reason so many people have this is because having one of those 3 ships is pretty much crucial to any meta build, because these are the 3 ships here, the Morgu, Arbiter, and Karak, that would unlock the emergency weapon cycle trait. So a lot of you probably already have this console and have probably used it and seen that it really doesn't really do that much for you. So now let's take a look at the set here, the Enhanced Weapon Systems Efficiency set for the 3 Valdore consoles. The 2-piece here is 25% weapon power cost reduction, plus 5 weapon power setting, plus 25 weapon power drain resistance rating. And the 3-piece is plus 5% max hull capacity and 35% flight turn rate. I think that many of you would probably be running the Valdore on your builds, and or the Valdore console, that shield absorptive frequency console. I could see a lot of you running that and maybe being interested in running a second console in this set. And if you're doing that, the shield or the ablative hazard shielding would be a good survivability console to run, alongside for that 2-piece. But if you're doing a more EPG focused build, then maybe the ionized particle beam would be a bit more interesting for you. For me, if I was running the 2-piece, I'd probably just go the Valdore console and the ablative hazard shielding consoles. And I do not think that the 3-piece is worth it. I think if you really want a hull capacity boost and a turn boost, you'd be better off just running a different console that explicitly has those boosts on it, rather than running this 3-piece. And next up, let's take a look at the consoles off of the Akira line of ships. At the left is the Point Defense System console off of the Tier 3 Akira. Middle is the Torpedo Point Defense System off of the Tier 5 Akira. And at the right is the Destabilized Tachyon Emitters from the T6 Akira. And at the bottom there is the set. Now let's take a look at each of these consoles. So let's start here with the Point Defense System. This is from the Tier 3 Thunderchild Heavy Escort refit, which you can again acquire in the shipyard for somewhere around 64 to 75k lithium, so pretty accessible. And what this console does is once a minute you can activate it. It is a toggle, so do not put it on your spam bar or you'll just immediately turn it off the moment you turn it on. And basically it's a phaser turret on your ship that is going to shoot out 4 times a second and damage nearby foes. If it hits like a pet, like an enemy pet, then it's going to do quite a bit more damage. If it hits a frigate, it'll do more damage, and it also has an accuracy buff associated with it. So it's basically a little phaser turret that's going to fire out of your ship for 10 seconds and do a lot of damage, or not a lot. It'll do some damage to things around you. And with one activation of it, I was able to get about 1.5 million damage in an ISC run. That ended up being about 15,000 DPS. For some of you, that's going to be a lot. For others, that's going to be not worth slotting. But it is important to note that this console can be boosted by Phaser Boost. It's got a 1-minute cooldown, so you can hit it quite a bit. And I would say it's not really a meta console, but it's something fun to use. It can do decent damage against like really small foes. And overall, it's really just a fun console to use, especially if you're trying to clear out a ton of like targetable torps or pets that are grouping up around you. Next up, we have the Torpedo Point Defense System console from the T5 Armitage. This is a T5 ship, so it'd be 2,500 Zen or $25 in the C-store. Or you could get the First Strike bundle and just get it as part of that legendary Akira there. This console has a 1-minute cooldown. It is buffed by plus Torp and plus Photon Boost. And again, it is toggleable like the other point defense console was, so don't spam bar. When you activate this console, it is going to fire 6 torpedoes out at up to 8 targets, so 6 torps per target, meaning that when you activate this, you can potentially get 48 photon torpedoes to go out of it. So it's pretty fun visually, and the fact that it can be buffed up by plus torpedo items does mean that it can actually do quite well even in the current state of the game. When I tried it out on some energy focused builds, so like beam ray builds, cannons, that type of stuff, I was getting about 20k DPS from it. But when I ran it on a torp boat, a high-end torp boat in a really high-end run, I ended up getting 70,500 DPS from it. So a good amount of damage from it, much better than many other Universal consoles do in that environment. Now, I want to show you all what both of these point defense system consoles look like when they fire. So I'm gonna scoot up here, and I'm gonna do the T3 one first, the point defense turret thing. So let's see what that looks like. And again, remember, the character that I'm showing this all on has literally nothing on it, doesn't have bridge officers or anything, so the damage numbers you're seeing here are just not anything to really go by. Now let me show the torpedo point defense console. So, wasn't the best visually to see there, because of how close I was, but it shot out 6 torpedoes at each of these targets, so a good amount of photon spam, and if you have a big group of enemies you're going into, hitting that console, especially when you've got buffs running, can be quite nice. So both of those consoles are quite fun, and I would very much recommend them for at least the fun aspect, but their performance can also do well if you boost them up. And I should also mention, both of them do have a 1-minute cooldown, so with Uncon you can actually have them up quite a bit more than most other consoles. And the last console in the Akira lineup is the destabilized Tachyon Emitters console. This is from the Tier 6 Elita Heavy Strike Wing Escort, which is 3000 Zen. There are also KDF and Romulan versions of this console, but like what we saw with the ablative console on the Valdore, you have to have the version specifically from that ship line to have it work with the set bonuses. This console just in general is focused on like shields, shield drains, and that really just isn't something to worry about in 2023. We've had a lot of things shift us away from shield drains like this over to just shield disables over the past couple of years. Things like the Bozeman's Tachyon Netrons, the Titans opening salvo, the carrier wave shield hacking trait that came out last year. Like there's a few different things out now that are just going to straight up disable enemy shields for a certain duration, and they're much, much more effective than these shield drain consoles, which just don't really net you that much, even with a lot of investment into Drain X. So this is a console that I can't recommend. I just do not think you should be running it. And last here for the Akira is the set for its consoles, the Heavy Escort Modification set. The two-piece is plus 20% kinetic torp damage, Cat 1, and plus 10% crit severity. The three-piece is 2.5% crit chance, 15% cooldown reduction for tactical and pilot bridge officer abilities, and plus 3 accuracy. I think the two-piece is fine. You know, especially if you're running the 2-point defense consoles, I think that's a really fun combo. I do not think the three-piece is worth running, and I'd also like to note that it has pilot cooldown reduction on it, but the legendary Akira doesn't have pilot seating. So it would be nice to see that updated to also reflect like command and miracle worker seating, or just all spec seating in general, but just know that that three-piece isn't going to do as much for you on the legendary version of the Akira. And next up, we have the Maelstrom Torpedo. So the Maelstrom is unfortunately exclusive to the First Strike bundle. You do get 2 of them for free when you claim the legendary Akira. I've seen quite a few people complaining about these costing like 40k in the Dilithium store in the Reclaim tab, but that's because I think people don't realize that they are on the ship and they're just immediately deleting all the weapons on the ship. So if you've done that, you can thankfully go in and reclaim the Akira. So just discard your Akira and then pick it back up, and when you pick it back up from the C store, it should again have 2 of those torpedoes on it. That may change in the future, but for right now, you can go through and reclaim them. So by picking up the Akira, you've got 2 of them there. You see them circled, and they are upgradable. So all you have to do is go in and right-click on the torpedo and upgrade, and it will automatically convert from Infinity to Mark 12, and then from there, you can upgrade them to Mark 15 Epic. So once you've done that, I would recommend that you change protected status to on so that you don't delete or salvage them. These can be salvaged, so definitely turn the protection on. And another nice thing is that they are account bound, meaning that if you upgrade a set of these on one character, you can then go and move them over to other characters on your account through the account bank. And they have stated that more torpedoes like this are going to be introduced into the game over time. So if you don't want to pick up this bundle, then hopefully we'll see them follow through and deliver some comparable torpedoes at some point in the near future. So now let's talk about the basics of this torpedo. This torpedo is a charged-based weapon that can do a massive amount of damage when you time it right and buff it up right on a target. As I've talked about in some prior content pieces, you really do not want to be auto-firing this weapon. you want to ideally be manually timing it to make sure that you are buffed up and hitting the target when they are most vulnerable. You can equip 2 of these Maelstrom Torps on your ship, and each of them will store 3 charges. Each charge takes 30 seconds to regenerate, so if you fire it off at the start of a run, your 3 stacks will be consumed, and it will take you 30 seconds to be able to fire the weapon again, 90 seconds to get back up to 3 charges. Most torpedo cooldown reduction methods do not impact this weapon. However, per some discussion that's been going on in the builds Discord, it does look like there are some abilities, some haste buffs like overpowered and overgunned, the Tellistu piece, the ultimate, and a couple other haste buffs that seem to be impacting this weapon. So there are currently ways to lower that 30-second recharge, but they're not always going to be available. Some of them are limited uptime. This weapon is boosted by plus torpedo and plus photon buffs. So it turns out that even though it says Maelstrom Quantum Torpedo, right in the thing there, right in the name, it turns out that quantum buffs don't actually buff this. Rather, photon buffs do. So, interesting note right there. And this torpedo is compatible with Torpedo Spread, High Yield, and Transport Warhead. I would highly recommend that you use it with Torpedo Spread. High Yield can also be effective in some situations, but definitely Torp Spread seems to be the most effective route here. So let me back up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire one of these Torps with Torp Spread 2, and then the other with the High Yield 1, just because that's all this character has. So let's do the High Yield 1.
Ship is under attack.
And even with this character having like no buffs, like this character is basically a brand new character. It's still, as you saw, a hit for quite a bit there. Now let's take a look at the Torp Spread 2 with the other one that has 3 charges. And look at all the photons that's spammed out there, or all the quantum photon, whatever they are. So if you time it right against enemies, it'll look good, and it'll also do a devastating amount of damage to them if it's buffed up. Again, that character I just showed you them firing on is not really buffed up at all. So here is some tooltips on a proper torpedo DPS build of what the Maelstrom looks like under Torpedo Spread 3 and High Yield 3. As you can see, the damage difference probably isn't as large of a gap as some of you would have expected. And if we actually look at the runs where people have been using the Maelstrom, they're almost always using it under just Torp Spread. So now let's talk about the Maelstrom from a torpedo point of view. And this is the part of the video that some of you aren't going to be happy to hear. But the Maelstrom Torp is very much immediately a core part of the DPS meta moving forward. On a properly built out build, when you time this torpedo properly, especially with Torpedo Spread, it does a massive amount of damage. This torpedo is so influential to the Torp meta that I would say the Torp meta has now shifted off of 4-4 setups over to 5-3. And the current record even was with the Eagle the other day, which is a 5 forward-facing ship. So you can see over there, even at the right on that parse that I have up on screen, which is the current ISC record by K, that they had 424k DPS out of the Maelstrom Quantum Torpedo. And that looks like it was basically just a single spread one that went off at some point in the run that did 31 million damage off of a single Torp spread. So really, really powerful weapon. And again, if you time it right and buff it up properly, it's devastating what it can do. And for those of you curious as to where it has, where you put it on your torpedo tray, I added it to my Torp Spread tray in front of the Neutronic. So it is the first torpedo on my torpedo spread tray. And for those of you on directed energy weapon builds, it still does perform quite well over there. I have been doing a few cannon scatter volley hybrid builds recently, and when I put the Maelstrom on my World Racer, I dropped all of the Torp traits and just put a Torp Spread 3 on just to see what this torpedo would do with Torp Spread 3, and you can see the numbers there. For me there, I had in a 1.1 mil run that was just over 90 seconds in ISE. It was a channel run, not supported. The torpedo did 303,000 DPS. So even on a do build, it is able to do a massive amount of damage in an infected environment and even other environments. Like I'm going to be showing some footage here shortly of me basically just going in and one-shotting the crystalline entity with this torpedo. So, important note here too, what you see from this torpedo is going to entirely depend on your build, how you buff and time things, and what debuff is being thrown out onto targets by your team. But I think even with just a little bit of timing, a little bit of buffing, you can get quite a bit out of this torpedo. And we've also seen this torpedo impact the ISA side of things. MB used this torp on his latest 2 million ISA run, which was Cannon Scatter Volley, and he had 441k DPS from it. And now let's take a look at a clip from my stream the other day. This was basically us going in and taking out the crystalline entity in the first phase, meaning that it didn't have its it didn't have any phases of invulnerability. It died before it got to that point. Now you can do this with a few different types of builds, but the Maelstrom really makes it easy. So I wasn't even using high yield. I just used Torp Spread, and you can see it literally just died. So if you went in with like a Maelstrom torpedo that was super buffed with high yield 3, I think you could go in and pretty much consistently one-shot the crystalline entity if you properly set up for it and buffed it up right. Like if I'm doing that with Torp Spread on a do build, on a directed energy weapon build, if I'm able to take down the entity in the first phase there, I think that those of you that actually build for it are going to be able to have a lot of success there. Also, fun fact, if you take the entity out in that first phase, you still get the rewards, but the queue doesn't actually complete, so you have to leave the map manually. But when we did it on stream, there was no lever penalty, and crystalline wasn't on cooldown. So do with that information what you will, and have fun. I'm curious to see if people can consistently pull off one-shotting the entity with this torpedo. Moving on, the Hangar Pets are something that I do want to cover more in a future content piece. So for those of you not aware, the legendary Akira and the legendary Valdore both have brand new exclusive pets associated with them, and the only way to acquire them is to purchase the First Strike bundle. These Hangar Pets are unique in that they have specialization integration. So the Akira ones, the Kodai, have command integration, and they basically, whenever you hit a command inspiration ability, you'll get a torpedo spread for those pets. And on the Temporal Ops Scorpion Fighters on the Valdore, they will just passively build up entropy on all the targets in the map, basically, and they're actually really good at it. So I do want to cover those pets more, but I need to get the Chronogami Displacer from the current First Contact Day event first, and I do not want to buy that out. I'm going to just continue playing free, or, going through and grinding it for free. So in about a week or so, I'll be taking a look at those pets, but I just wanted to mention here today that for those of you that have any interest in this bundle, you need to make sure that you're going out and playing the First Contact Day event that is currently live, because this Chronogami Displacer is in a 2-piece set with the Temporal Ops Scorpion Fighters. And that 2-piece gives those pets a 20% damage boost, which is going to be fairly sizable. So if if you have any interest, again, I just make sure you're going out and getting that. You may not care about it today, you may not care about it a month from now, but a year from now, you might be putting together a build and wishing you had this thing. So even if you don't care about it, just get it, and get it while it's freely obtainable. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for it later in Muds or Phoenix if you do end up wanting it. In summary, the Maelstrom Torps are insanely powerful, as some of us sort of expected them to be. But of course, they have that limitation of not being a weapon that you should have on auto fire. You really do want to be manually timing those to make sure that they're going off at the right point. But if you time them right and buff them right, then the Maelstrom Torps are insanely powerful and will most certainly be a core part of the DPS meta moving forward. The next big point here is the Valdore console, the Shield Absorptive Frequency Generator. This is an insanely powerful shield heal, and it's probably the best shield heal we have in the entire game. And if you don't want to get the bundle, you can go out and just pick up the T3 Valdore right from your shipyard for as much as 75,000 lithium per character. So that is a really accessible console. And I think if you try it on a tank build you have, or even just a general build that you take into TFOs that has energy weapons on it, I think you're going to see that that is helping your survivability quite a bit. And lastly, the point defense consoles from the Akira are quite fun. The torpedo point defense one specifically will fire up to 48 photons per minute. So if you're looking for a console that will let you spam a ton of photons out at everything, or a ton of torpedoes, that is definitely a console to keep in mind going forward. And the last note for this video today is that I do really like the changes that Cryptic has made here. These changes are all increasing build diversity, and they're increasing the value of older content in the game. These changes have also been applied retroactively to the existing items that we already had from those ships, which means that even for those of you that don't buy this bundle, you can still benefit from those consoles being unlocked if you've got them unlocked already. I do hope that this trend of unlocking ship consoles does continue over time, and I would like to see as many consoles unlocked as possible if they ever have the spare time to do so. There are many different consoles out there that are very good but are locked to specific ships. The Amari one is a big example for me. With me doing Torp builds, that's a console that would be quite fun to try on ships that are more effective torpedo platforms. And that's locked to that ship, so I can't use it. So if Cryptic could go through and just spend some time unlocking and removing these restrictions from a bunch of consoles, I think it would be a big boost for the game. It would definitely increase build diversity, give us more options, and it would also bring more value to content that they've already worked on, that they've already built. So that's a way for them to have another revenue stream into the game by increasing the value of the stuff that's already in the game. But that's going to be it for this video today. Thank you again to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. Let me know what you think down below. Are you excited for any of these changes, or have you tried out some of these and seen a massive boost for your build? Let me know down below. See you guys around.